What would you do if the people meant to protect your community turned your home into a battleground? For Tom Hargrove, the answer was simple: fight fire with fire. In the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, where manicured lawns and cookie-cutter homes stretched as far as the eye could see, Tom's modest farmhouse stood out like a rebel flag. The old wooden fence he'd built around his acre of land hand-hewn from oak he'd cut himself wasn't just a boundary. It was a symbol of his independence. But the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, HOA, saw it differently. To them, it was an eyesore, a violation of their pristine aesthetic. When they slapped him with a $500 fine for non-compliant fencing, Tom's blood boiled. He wasn't just going to pay it. He was going to make them regret ever knocking on his door. Tom had lived on his land for 20 years, long before the HOA's iron grip tightened around the neighborhood. His property, a holdover from the area's rural past, was grandfathered into the zoning laws, giving him freedoms the newer residents could only dream of. The HOA, led by the insufferable Margaret Klein, had been itching to control him for years. Margaret, with her perfectly coiffed hair and clipboard always at the ready, seemed to take personal offense at Tom's untamed garden, his chickens clucking freely, and that hideous fence. The fine was her latest jab, but Tom wasn't the type to back down. He'd spent his life outsmarting bigger foes, first as a scrappy kid on a farm, then as a surveyor who knew land laws better than most lawyers. This time, he'd turn their own rules against them. The plan began with a late-night visit to the county records office. Tom pored over zoning maps, deeds, and ordinances, his coffee growing cold as the hours ticked by. He discovered a loophole. The HOA's prized clubhouse, a gaudy building where they held their self-important meetings, sat on a plot zoned ambiguously as community use. With a few well-placed calls and a favor from an old friend in the zoning board, Tom proposed a reclassification. The land could be redesignated as agricultural overflow, a designation his own property already held. It was a long shot, but Tom's charm and a stack of meticulously prepared documents sealed the deal. By dawn, the paperwork was filed. By noon, it was approved. Enter Clara, the twist in Tom's tale. Clara was Margaret's teenage daughter, a quiet girl who often wandered the neighborhood with a sketchbook, drawing the wildflowers that grew on Tom's land. Unlike her mother, Clara had no love for the HOA's rigidity. She'd once confided in Tom that she dreamed of being an artist, not a suburban drone. When Clara overheard her mother ranting about Tom's disgraceful fence, she slipped him a note. "Mom's planning to double the fine. Don't let her win." That note was the spark Tom needed. Clara's quiet rebellion gave him the resolve to push his plan further than he'd intended, not just to win, but to teach a lesson. That night, under a moonless sky, Tom executed the second phase. He borrowed a dozen goats from a neighboring farm and herded them onto the clubhouse lawn. The zoning change was already in effect, and agricultural overflow allowed livestock. By morning, the HOA's pristine lawn was a muddy mess, with goats bleeding and chewing through Margaret's prized azaleas. The clubhouse, once a symbol of control, was now a barnyard. Neighbors gathered, some outraged, others stifling laughter. Margaret's face turned crimson as she stormed toward Tom, who leaned casually against his fence, sipping coffee. "This is outrageous," she shrieked. Tom just shrugged. "Check the zoning, Margaret. It's all legal." The fallout was swift. The HOA held an emergency meeting, but their hands were tied. Reversing the zoning would take weeks, and Tom's goats weren't going anywhere. Clara, watching from the sidelines, gave Tom a subtle nod, her sketchbook now filled with drawings of the chaotic scene. The neighborhood began to fracture. Some sided with Margaret, others with Tom, who'd become an unlikely hero to those tired of the HOA's overreach. In the end, the HOA dropped the fine, and Tom agreed to move the goats. But the message was clear: push too far, and the underdog might push back harder. Tom's victory wasn't just about a fence or a fine. It was about standing up for what's yours, about finding allies in unexpected places, like Clara, whose quiet courage reminded him that even in a world of rules, there's room for rebellion. As the sun set over his oak fence, Tom looked out at his land, free and unbroken. He'd won more than a fight, won back his peace. Yindy.